Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week, I spoke to Phil Griffiths, the educational lead at Framesync. Framesync is a virtual production company who helps storytellers by offering a full service consultancy, from creative planning to on site delivery. They have a development arm creating tools for the industry and a series of courses helping to upskill creative practitioners in all things virtual production. This is a great one if you're interested in virtual production. It's something you don't know a lot about. I really grill Phil on all of the ins and outs of it. We also talked about whether this technology could be used by micro budget, low budget filmmakers, the impact it's having on the industry. I asked him for the challenges of using this technology and the opportunities it presents. And we also talked about his own personal career. He was previously a music teacher and now he's working in this brand new industry. Enjoy. So, first of all, for those who don't know, tell me what virtual production is.
Virtual production is really a kind of umbrella term for lots of different technologies and lots of different techniques. So the way I like to think about it is it kind of breaks down into like a couple of different areas. So you might want to think about visualization to begin with. That might be like previs, post-vis, tech-vis. You might want to think about motion capture or performance capture. You might want to think about like a hybrid approach, which where you might have a green screen and tracked cameras. And then finally, what lots of people think of when they talk about virtual production is this kind of big LED wall and like Mandalorian style approach, which is really what you call in-camera visual effects or ICVFX. That's how I like to sort of describe virtual production to people.
Right.
It's not just one thing; it's lots of different techniques, lots of different technologies.
Right. Okay. But I guarantee the thumbnail for this is going to have a big picture of an LED screen on it because, like you say, that
Yeah,
is what
yeah,
you immediately
100%.
think of, and it is kind of, I guess, am I right in saying that is the sort of latest bit of kit within these things you're talking about? That's the most newest part of it.
Yeah, I think it's the part that where lots of technologies have suddenly in the last 5 to 10 years have got good enough to be able to make a real difference to film. So the quality of LED has increased, the quality of 3D tracking has increased, the quality of render engines and computer power has increased, and therefore you can do things that you couldn't do 10 to 15 years ago. But really, all of these sort of areas of virtual production have been around for a while, and then it's this culmination in the last few years, and then a couple of sort of big players in the industry putting some money into it and it being seen on screen in a way that we haven't seen before. So yeah, that's why lots of people are now talking about it.
Yeah. And do you think is it changing filmmaking, or is it just a tool in a box that people use, or is it sort of changing everything?
Yeah, I really try to think of it as a tool. It's a storytelling tool. And if it helps you with your production because you want to shoot in a specific location that you can't get to and you either can't fly your crew there or you just can't access it, and instead you can shoot that on a volume, fantastic. If it helps you because you want to do a car scene and you don't want to have to block off roads and sort of deal with all the health and safety and those side of things, and you want lovely reflections on your vehicles, whether that's a car or a train or a plane, perfect. It's wonderful. I think sometimes people are going down the route of, I'm going to design a story around in-camera visual effects, around this LED wall. But really, I think storytelling should come first,
Mhm.
and you should have a great story and then work out what technology do you need to support the telling of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I like to think about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Out of interest, has a film been entirely shot on one of those yet, to your
Yeah,
knowledge?
I can't think of one that I could sort of stand here and say, oh, it's
Mm.
entirely on an LED volume. There are shows such as 1899 where a significant part of the story and the filmmaking is based around sets within that LED volume,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean that everything has been shot there. So
Yeah,
yeah, not yet as far as I'm aware.
not
Happy to
yet.
be corrected though.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Maybe someone will
Yeah.
accept it. So obviously I've got my micro budget, low budget hat on. Is this accessible to people with less money to make their film or not? This kind of technology.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more accessible. I think you have to think carefully about what you're trying to achieve. And again, I think the big barrier is that people see a huge LED volume and there's obviously an associated cost with that huge LED volume. But the reality of us working in the industry is that you don't always have to have a huge LED volume to get what you want. There are shoots where particular sort of low budget shoots where you're trying to get two TVs to do the same overall effect as that huge LED volume might do. And sometimes that can be really successful. I think in terms of low budget, I did one of the very first sort of virtual production shoots I did. I took Unreal Engine and I'd made an environment in Unreal Engine along with one of my colleagues. And we then had a green screen background, but we tracked the camera position and then we composited sort of this 3D environment onto our footage in post-production. Now, really, that's still virtual production because we're still tracking a camera using a real-time environment. We've got sort of real physical sets and actors and everything in that, and then we've composited it in post-production. So that workflow cost less than £1,000 and we got a really great music video out of it. I think it just depends where your expectations are. If you want to film a car commercial and you need an LED volume that wraps all the way around your car, there is an associated cost with that. If you're really clever with how you line up shots, maybe you use maybe you use a smaller amount of LED, maybe you use a TV, maybe you do some rear projection or some front projection, and all of those other technologies that still fall underneath that virtual production bracket and are still, I think, really accessible. I think especially low budget filmmaking, thinking about projectors and how you can sensibly use a projector is probably a great place to start.
Yeah. But I don't want a projector. I want that big LED screen. That's what I want. I mean, is
That's
it?
fine. In which case, you can have that big LED screen, and you can think carefully about how you want to use that, and then you
Yeah,
can work out whether there's a budget for that.
sure. So then just thinking about it, because it's this new thing, and I know I'm focusing just on the LED screen, but it feels like it's the thing that people have most questions about. Say I book this, I've got a bit of budget, I book it for a day. What am I paying for? Do I have to have special people there to work it? Can a regular DOP turn up? Is he going to know instantly how to get his head around it? Are there data wranglers? What are the sort of costs associated and personnel I need to make it work?
Yeah, sure. So, um, studios often are providing all of the crew in order to make that system work. And I think what's really important is to understand that people like your DOP are still an integral, absolutely important part of this overall process. And what you're getting when you go to that volume is probably the volume itself, the technology to run the volume, and hopefully some people to run that volume as well, unless you say you don't need them. But most of the time, they're coming as part of this package. And the thing that's most important, I try and do, and we at Framesync try and encourage people to do, is to think about pre-production and the planning in the pre-production stage and working with whoever's on your volume to make sure that the content that you put onto that wall looks as good as it can do. Do you, for example, need a 3D environment? Or could you get away with two-dimensional plate footage? Maybe you're just trying to do a car scene and therefore you don't actually need to build a 3D environment in Unreal Engine or Unity or various other programs. You actually just need some two-dimensional footage playing back to give the effect of the car moving.
Mm.
And depending on which studio you're going to, you might find that it's actually cheaper to run two-dimensional footage than it is to build a fully 3D environment. So it's trying to work with the sort of virtual production team to figure out what's the best way forward for your particular story. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And just thinking about that, because I sort of watched when I knew I was going to chat to you, I watched a few clips as you do, and I watched some stuff from the Batman. And like you say, there were some shots of him on a motorbike where the background was just blurred stuff because he's on his
Yep,
motorbike, which looked really
yep.
cool. So you kind of, I guess, you can get away with some stuff. But looking at the Unreal Engine, everyone talks about it. So we know, do you have to pay for Unreal Engine? Where do you learn to use it? Can I watch a bunch of YouTubes and figure it out, or do I need to go on a course?
Yeah, sure. No, great question. So, at the moment, Unreal Engine is still free to download. My understanding is that there is going to be a licensing for which I don't have personally all of the details as I don't work for Epic Games, but they are visible online. I think it's to do with whether you're as a studio you're hitting about £1 million for your project. But please check that out.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to that. But the one thing I would say is that you can go onto the Epic Games website, download the Epic Games launcher, and then you can install Unreal Engine from there. At the moment, as of where are we? April 2024. Most of us are working in version 5.3. 5.4 preview has just come out. Yes, there are loads of tutorials on YouTube. There are various courses from lots of different providers. You can go and figure it out.
Mm.
I've personally just really enjoyed exploring that as an avenue for creativity. And yeah, now I get to use it in my day job as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun.
And is there anything you would liken it to? Is there any other programs a filmmaker might use you'd liken it to?
So I guess if you've ever done any 3D, you might have used Blender before because that's also free. And so I think there's really good comparisons between Blender and Unreal Engine. And if you've done game design, you might have done that in Unity or Unreal Engine. So there's a comparison there. I think there are comparisons. So when you start getting into the sort of camera positioning and lining up camera shots. That's still timeline based in a part of Unreal Engine called Sequencer. So that's similar to working in DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut. So I think Unreal pulls lots of different threads from different programs, I guess. But it's yeah, I think it's okay for getting started. I think
Yeah.
it's a good place to get started. You don't need to learn how to code if you don't want to, although that is an option if you choose to go down that route. And I think even just getting some pre-visualization practice in,
Mm.
blocking out different scenes, that's a great place to start.
And am I right in saying you do have to pay for assets? So if you're paying for, or is that all free as well? So if I want a certain type of tree, have I got to pay for that, or how's that work?
So the way I would look at it is you can pay for assets, but
Hmm.
you don't have to. There is a huge Epic Games marketplace in which people have uploaded things that you can purchase. One thing just to say about that is every month there's a free selection of assets that Epic Games give out, but the real I would say one of the best parts of Unreal Engine is the Quixel bridge and the Quixel assets, the Megascans asset library, because there's 15,000 or something different assets that you can get for free. You can download them in a variety of different resolutions and just bring them straight into your game. And
Mm.
I would say I've done that 98% of the time for building levels. I think
Yeah.
I've probably bought 2 asset packs, maybe 3 in total. You don't have to pay money to get started here. I would say just get started, download it, and have a go.
Have a go. Okay, so then that brings me on to the next thing I would worry about as a filmmaker, uh, copyright, legal stuff. So if I guess I would get somebody in who's an expert on Unreal Engine. They'd create my backgrounds. I'd have the same sort of contract I'd have with any special effects person, I'm assuming, because that's their work on screen. So with those assets, do I need to worry about that? Do you think is that something I've got to keep track of what assets they're using? Are the people who created those assets going to come after me if I've used them in a feature film? And am I allowed to use them in a
Sure.
feature film?
Yeah, so my understanding with the Megascans assets, and please do read the T's and C's
Yeah.
before taking this to print, everyone. But uh, my understanding is it fits under the Epic Games license around whether you're paying after you've got a successful product. That's my understanding.
Mm.
I've never needed to really explore that avenue. I would say that lots of the time when you're working, you're likely to work with what's called a VAD, which is a virtual art department, just in the same way that you would work with a normal VFX house,
Mm.
and you would have an agreement with them that says the assets that they're making are for use on your film and possibly only on your film, depending on what agreement you make. So I think that's not something to worry about. That's just a question to ask and a T's and C's to check if you're, yes, that's
Yeah.
what I would suggest.
T's and C's. And then looking, what's the future? What's in store, like further down the line for this? Do you think? Where's it going?
Yeah, I think. we're always working towards photorealism. How real can you make that LED wall look? There's an awful lot of research and exploration into the color pipeline at the moment, and how does an LED wall reproduce color, and how accurate is that in comparison to sunlight at different times of the day. We've got sort of in the process of being launched at the moment are a number of new LED processors and LED panels, which should effectively more accurately reproduce light. And I think that will be really interesting for DOPs, and anyone who's and colorists and DITs and anyone who's got a particular focus on the color accuracy of an LED wall and how to manipulate that color to get the best out of the LED wall. I think that's particularly
Mm,
interesting. I
mm,
think there's some um, there'll be some interesting steps around generative AI and how that can produce either environments or what would be called 2.5D, which is kind of where you have a series of static images that are stacked in a three-dimensional world, and that will be interesting. I think another possible offshoot is the development of machine learning techniques for rotoscoping, and maybe that will get to the stage where you're using an LED wall, but you're really using it to capture light from the scene, and then possibly you rotoscope your actor anyway. That happens at the moment. There's a whole host of really interesting things sort of happening, especially even if you just take graphics cards and how great a now consumer graphics card is in order to produce these environments. You were saying earlier about sort of low budget and entering this world. If you're particularly interested in sort of computer generated imagery and animation, that you can now get a graphics card for cheaper than the graphics card you can get can do more than it's ever done before.
mm.
And just rendering a CG video from something like Unreal can be quite an incredible storytelling device. So
Yeah.
yeah, lots of areas, lots of
Lots of
things to explore.
areas, exciting times, but then flip side, what are the sort of challenges and the downsides?
Yeah, I think the downsides are that or maybe the challenge is that we're combining lots of technology and we're pushing that every single day to tell creative stories.
Mm,
I must say, though, I don't think that's any different from any other time in history. If you track back over the history of ILM, for example, and there's a fantastic documentary about that history, every time they make a movie, they're trying to push things forward. And that's really the same as what we're trying to do in virtual production. Where, if you look at the behind the scenes for The Flash and Aquaman, in the way that they had an Insta360 camera recording above one actor, and so that's capturing all of it's capturing footage on either side of the camera, and then they're replaying that footage to get light emission onto an actor's face, so they can accurately map that face effectively. That's an incredible technology, but it's at the forefront. And
mm,
because no one had done that, as far as I'm aware, no one had tried that technique before the Flash, and it was it's challenging.
mm.
Whenever you're trying to do something that you're having to um, alter software in order to do the thing that you want it to do, it's going to be hard. And I think that the best thing that people can do is to try and upskill themselves in a sort of broad sense. What's happening in this wide world of virtual production? And you don't have to go super deep into all of these areas, but find someone who is a specialist in that particular area and be able and go and talk to them. But
Mm.
by having a broad level of knowledge, you can at least have an articulate conversation
Yeah,
around what you need as a storyteller. I think there will always be challenges in that sense.
yeah, and I would say that's a good piece of advice for anyone producing or directing, is to have a broad range of knowledge of all of the roles on set. But this specifically, if you're using this, if you can have that conversation, it's going to make your life so much easier if you're going to use it. Um,
Yeah,
One other thing, I've seen one, I've looked at it, I haven't touched it. Does it get hot? Is there any safety issues around it? I'm
yeah,
assuming it
sure.
uses a lot of juice.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I mean it will get warm. And I guess in terms of safety issues, just things to be aware of is how it's being hung. Are you ground stacking it from the floor up, or are you hanging it from a truss? But there are a huge number of very competent people at building LED.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, there are some great teams out there who can help you. And I guess the other thing, just to jump back to your previous point around how much does it cost and where do you go and what do you
Mm.
need, is remembering that you don't have to go to a studio that has one of these LED volumes pre-built. If you have a specific scenario, then you can reach out to people who provide that LED, and they can build that in the dimensions that you need it.
Mm.
And therefore, if you've got a specific use case and you don't want 25 meters by 5 meters from a particular studio, you can adapt, and LED providers, distributors, suppliers, sorry, will be able to help you with that journey. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's, I mean, health and safety, you don't want to kick it. You know, there's
Don't kick it.
there's
Got it. Right. Yeah, we
I
got that. Don't kick it.
yeah, I was somewhere the other day, and I someone had clearly walked along and hit the LED with something rather sharp. So I ended
Oh,
up, and so they basically took some pixels off of one of the
yeah.
panels and ended up swapping it out. And yeah, the accident, I would say accidents happen, but equally you're dealing with an expensive piece of equipment. But I would say everyone on film sets I've ever been on, they're well versed in not touching other people's equipment, and
Mhm.
just making sure you're respectful of who's around you and what they're doing. So
Yeah. So the other thing I was going to say was presumably companies that have got these LED uh, volumes set up aren't being used all the time. So maybe there's some space there for a micro, low budget filmmaker to say, hey, it's not being used this weekend. Can we come in and get a bit of money off?
yeah, I would absolutely agree with that as an
Mm.
opportunity. And I would certainly say that if you have an LED volume in your area, either with a professional studio, a university, a test site, any of these things, and you're interested, just get in contact and say, look, I'm really interested in how we can use this. Is there a way we can work together? And as a storyteller, be inventive. Is it that they can let you use the volume, but they get publicity um, from when you publicize the film? How benefit in kind? Is there anything that you can do to help them at the same time if they're trying to build the studio? Is there a reduced rate they could give it to you for? How does all that work? I think the one thing I'm finding at the moment is studios they don't always have set rates specifically. It depends, how long do you want the studio for? How many are you shooting? 2D, 3D? Is it a particularly quiet period? Is it a busy? All of these things, all of these variables, um, can be quite flexible. And
Mm.
and I would say it's much better to go and start that conversation, and maybe you find that there is no space at the moment, and it just
Mm.
doesn't work out, and that happens. But I would say, just back to that green screen story, of my first virtual production shoot, we I had multiple teams sort of working together, and the studio very, very kindly gave us the studio for free because they wanted to see how the technology was used and what could be done with it, and whether it was something that they wanted to use in the future.
Mm.
So it kind of became a win-win, because my team were trying to test the technology and test it creatively. They wanted to do the same thing. The band wanted something that didn't cost very much money. Could we find a way of working? There's a gap in the diary, let's go for 2 days. Great. I think this whole industry is about relationships and about people. And I think as long as you're aware of what you're asking,
Mm.
and I say what the cost of that is. I don't necessarily mean financially, but in any sense, what the cost of that ask is, and is it the right time to ask? Is it day one? You've turned up there, you've looked at the LED wall, and you've gone, "Can I have this on Saturday?" Yes, probably, maybe not the best way forward.
Yeah.
This is a valuable asset for that studio, and it takes a high level of skill to use it to the best of its ability.
Mm.
Um, are you in the right place as a filmmaker to take advantage of that? you know, I spoke to a director not too long ago, and they came to see me and said, I've got it's sort of on the thread of what you were saying about has
Mm,
anyone shot everything in a volume? And they said, I want to shoot this short film. I'm going to shoot everything in a volume. And I said, well, actually, there's a couple of things here that you'd probably just be better to find a location for
mm,
in terms of the budget that you're working at. And you don't have to do everything on a LED stage if you don't want to,
yeah,
if there's not a need for it.
yeah,
Think carefully about that use case.
yes. Good advice. And I'm sure you get asked this a lot. Well, not this specific version of this question, but how long is it going to be before I can go to Costco and buy one and bring it home and do it at home myself?
What, and buy an LED screen?
Yeah. How before
Uh,
it's like I'm looking at the sort of 599 price range. I buy one,
599.
yeah,
Right.
only as big as this room. How long have I got to wait? How many years do you think?
As- who knows? Who knows? But I would say at your current budget level,
Yeah.
I would just go and buy a very, very big non-reflective TV,
Right.
and 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 that would probably get you
Right.
further than you would think,
I'm not even
actually.
sure I'd get a very good telly for that money at the moment. I'd probably end
Yeah,
up with a.
maybe not. How am I going to get you an LED wall for that then? It's a
It's going to
trick
be a while.
question. It's a
It's a trick
trick
question.
question.
Yeah, it's a
There's
trick
no
question.
way.
Um, so then the other thing I was interested to ask you about was because when I met you, you talked about having a different career before you got into this game.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was, I guess my interest was, wow, because this is a new technology, are there new careers opening up into it? So it was really just a bit about your own journey into this.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I was a teacher for about 10 years.
Mm,
Um, I was taught music and music tech, and then was head of music technology. Sorry, head of music at a few different schools, and worked my way up into working in a sixth form, and then decided that I just really wanted to change. I really wanted to move into really film, TV, video, media production, somewhere around that. So I worked for a video production company for about 18 months, and then about 18 months ago from now, I just decided that I really wanted to push into the film, TV, and live events using all of this sort of virtual production technology, for want of a better phrase. And yeah, did a lot of learning.
mm,
did a took as many sort of courses as I could. I do a lot of reading, did a lot of experimenting with you know with all as much of the technology as I could get access to, whether
mm,
that's Disguise or Pixera or Unreal Engine or Blender, or just really to try and grasp that broad brushstroke. And I think the benefit for someone like me coming into the industry at this point is that I bring I bring other skills. So I bring people skills and management skills and production skills. And now I have a technical aspect within this world of virtual production as well. And that combination has really helped me,
mm,
because it means I can talk to lots of different stakeholders and pull their creative ideas into a virtual production space, but I can also work with bringing my team together to make sure we get that delivered.
mm,
And that has helped me a great deal. I think in terms of, are there new roles? Yeah, I think there are new roles, in terms of how the sort of game engine approach of something like Unreal Engine has combined with the film and TV approach of being on set. So things like being an Unreal Engine operator on set wasn't really a thing 10 years ago, as far as I'm aware. I can't track back for the first time Unreal hit a
mm,
scene, but or hit a set. That's a new position. Something like a virtual production supervisor, as it's kind of being called at the moment, is really again a newish position.
mm,
Um, I think that there's um, maybe a slight misunderstanding about the skill level required to do some of those things.
mm,
It's not as simple as day one in film and TV, day two virtual production supervisor.
mm,
Um, there's a lot of learning that takes place, and there's a real balance between the complexity of the technology and the system and making it all work, and ease of use.
Mm.
And at Framesync, we're doing a lot to try and make that ease of use a focus, both for universities and for DOPs and directors on set, and trying to enable filmmakers to do what they do best. But there is still an awful lot of technology that goes on under the hood,
Mm.
and that's why having specialists there to 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 bring the best out of you as a filmmaker is a really good idea. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and how I've kind of got into this, and yeah.
Is there a website or an online resource you would suggest people use to kind of keep up to date with this stuff? What do you subscribe to, anything in particular?
I think if you're trying to figure out words, there's something called VP Glossary, which is a great it's a glossary of words within virtual production. Um, there's a group called Starting Pixel, which is a group of professionals who are um, all really working in virtual production. There's Framework, which isn't specifically about virtual production, but is about wider immersive technologies. Um, there's it's always helpful to sort of keep in touch with people like Disguise or Pixera, Epic Games, companies like Framesync or Lux Machina, and people who are working in this space, just to sort of see what's going on. There's so much happening. If you were to then list companies like Rowe or Brompton, who do make LEDs and LED
Mm.
processors, and there's lots changing, and I think it can be quite overwhelming to begin with, um, and so it's worth thinking about, once you've got a broad brushstroke of understanding which elements go into virtual production, which bit are you most interested in? Are you most interested in the 3D um, world creation? Are you most interested in the media server that might run it? Are you most interested in the tracking system, the camera tracking system? Um, which bit are you sort of most interested in? Or maybe you're interested in the production side of looking after a virtual production shoot. All
Mm.
of those aspects are worthy explorations, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what, in your opinion, is the best use of virtual production in a TV show or film?
Sure. Um, I watched the behind the scenes for 1899 not too long ago, and so it's a series on Netflix, and they had a huge curved LED with a ship inside it, and I won't ruin it for people that want to go and watch the series, but I just think personally, I think they made a great choice in the production design and how they blend the production with the LED wall. I didn't work on it or know any that worked on it, but from what I've seen, they really well planned out how they were going to do that shoot, why they should use an LED wall, and what they should put on that LED wall, and that's just really great to see. It's because then you watch the series and you're just immersed in it. You're not thinking, "Oh, there's an LED wall there." You, it just looks like it should do if they were on a ship in the middle of the ocean. Um, yeah, I think that
Yeah.
the overall culmination of what they managed to pull together was really great.
Yeah. And if it's the one I'm thinking of, which I also watched and thought was awesome, and it was, the sort of art direction was beautiful as well, and it all kind of married up. The only spoiler is they've cancelled it, haven't they? They're not making the next series. Which always happens with anything good. Um, damn it. So, if my next question is, if you could remake any film using virtual production, what would it be?
Oh, if I could remake any film, I think the thing I'd be tempted to sort of remake would be um, kind of any movie in the 60s where there's a car and there's a rear projection and it's kind of not matched at all to what's happening in the scene. But I'm also sort of quite nostalgically fond of those things and looking back at some of the James Bond movies and thinking, you know what, it doesn't look realistic, but Sean Connery's there, and I'm in the story, I'm in the moment, and I still believe it, and that's what we're always really aiming for. So yeah, there we go. That's what I do. That's what I do.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you want more advice from industry professionals who are out there at the moment working, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from film sets from around the world, then please do subscribe.